Good morning, welcome back. My name is James Mennie of the Montreal Gazette, sitting in for Tommy the Tommy Schnurmacher Show. My next guest is taking a swing at a concept that many of us have grown up with in this country, that many of us believe is a part of this country's DNA, even though it's a relatively recent innovation. Multiculturalism is supposed to make this nation richer in terms of the diversity of its society, and I've always felt that multiculturalism was one way that this country could differentiate itself from the U.S. by actually going 180 degrees from the U.S.'s melting pot philosophy that no matter where you're from, the minute you set foot on our shores, you are an American. Don't quite do things like that over here, although things are slowly beginning to change. But my next guest, Salim Mansur, is a Sun newspaper columnist, professor of political science at Western University, and he's the author of a new book, Delectable Lie, A Liberal Repudiation of Multiculturalism. He joins us now. Welcome to CJAD.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for having me.
Why? I mean, your title alone, you're not pulling any punches. It's a delectable lie. Why is it a lie, and why is it delectable?
Well, I mean, you introducing this program, introducing me, you almost, spelled it out yourself. I mean, you have taken this matter of multiculturalism and written into your DNA code, and you seem to suggest, I mean, you're speaking out loud for, I think, many Canadians, that this is what distinguishes Canada from the rest of the world, but most importantly from the United States, and this is what stands up as our identity, and so on and so forth. Well, aren't they all delectable? They're such pleasing concepts. They're like candy floss, You suck upon it, and you get your mouth all sweetened and lovely. But when you actually push your finger into the candy floss, there's nothing, empty air, and that's what it is, and that's the lie. It is all built up as a great adventure and a great idea, but there is no political substance to it. There's no philosophical substance to it when you examine it, and that's what I have done.
There are some listeners out there right now, Mr. Mansour, who's going to say, you know what? There is a tangible result. It's the hyphenated Canadian.
Well, that's if you are happy with being a hyphenated Canadian, and that's what distinguishes Canadians from the Americans, then, you can have that delectable lie and be very happy with it, But what is the consequences of being hyphenated Canadian that we have now had for 40 years? Canada is a much more divided country as a result of hyphenated Canadian. We have lowered the sense of identity of who we are historically. That is this country that was founded almost 150 years ago. In 2017, we will be celebrating 150th anniversary. Canada is an intimate part of Western civilization, and Canada was built up on the basis of a liberal democratic ideals, liberalism with a small L, and that itself has a culture, that itself is a philosophical basis, and that is about freedom based upon individual rights and rule of law. And that's what Canada represented, and that's what we have torn away from, and we moved away from in terms of multiculturalism. What multiculturalism has done is set up this utter nonsense that all cultures are equal. Now, where did Canadians discover this notion, and the Canadian leadership discover this notion that all cultures are equal? Tell me, would the culture of the Franks and the Visigoths and the Huns equal to the culture of the mighty Roman Empire, even in its decline? Is the culture of the Afghan Taliban equal to the culture of liberal democracy? Is the culture that, denigrates women, takes women as a half of a value, celebrates misogyny in terms of religious disguise, a culture equal to the culture that respects and treats women with gender equity, human rights, individual freedom? So this was a balderdash. And we bought into this argument. We bought into this argument because we had veered away from the respect of our own values. We started to denigrate our own values or have suspicion for our own value. The results, we now have it. We are a mush.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Salim Mansur. He's the author of A Delectable Lie, A Liberal Repudiation of Multiculturalism. The whole concept of multiculturalism, which basically had its birth in the administrations of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, was Prime Minister. He really pushed the idea that we would become a cultural mosaic. Do you believe this is an idea that has become perverted over time, or do you believe that there was nothing good with it to start with?
There was nothing good to start it, but we bought into it. As I just mentioned, candy floss, people buy into it. Look, 40 years later, those countries that tried to emulate Canada's leadership, I put leadership within quotation marks, and it was not simply Pierre Elliott Trudeau, it was Brian Mulroney, again, Montrealer now, whose government wrote the Multiculturalism Act into the Canadian laws. So it was the political elite. And the political elite, the intellectual elite, and the media elite all worked together in one hoopla as if this was a great celebration of what will be a new Canada. Those countries, those liberal democracies that took this idea and tried to implement it are now vomiting it out.
Let me ask you,
just hold on. You know, you have Britain, you have Germany, you have France, you have the Netherlands. All the elected leadership have said that this is extremely divisive. This has not created social harmony. It does not advance national interests, and the West is in a great difficulty. We don't want to face up and criticize. We are all stuffed with political correctness, and we cannot stand up and say what we need to be said.
Now, that said, okay, as long as we're performing this autopsy on multiculturalism, let's dig a little deeper. What if, would you agree with me if I said that, you know what, multiculturalism from the very beginning was nothing more than a very cynical political ploy to get various ethnic minorities to vote a particular way, and to a certain extent it's a practice that's still being continued?
Well, I write about that. You know, that's what I've written. You know, part of my study, my book points that out. It was a bad faith argument. I mean, this was a political ploy. You're absolutely right. You might even go further. I don't necessarily buy into the argument of conspiracy, but there are those who would say that multiculturalism was, in effect, a way to dilute English Canada's identity and history, and so that biculturalism could be sold, you know. Biculturalism or bilingualism was a perfectly right argument to be made. Canada should be a bilingual country. There are many other countries that are bilingual country and bicultural country. But the idea of multicultural, where does it come from? What is its keystone principle when you start examining it? Well, now we have the effects of the multiculturalism idea. You have in Montreal, you have in Toronto, you have people pushing the idea of Sharia law. We have ideas, you know, that people want to practice values and cultures that go completely contrary to our principle, our Charter of Rights and Freedom that is based upon individual right. This is a 500-year struggle where Western civilization, Western culture has come to. And now the people want to jettison that?
Now, that said, it's still, as I mentioned in the introduction, it's still with us. It may have taken a battering, and it's still
stuck with it till we repeal it.
Well, this is the problem. How do you repeal a concept like that?
Well, you know, that is something that has to have a political discussion. I mean, more voices have to join in to question it, that, you know, this is a thing that we have gotten stuck with. It was a bad idea. It has brought us into more difficulties. It is basically taking away from us the very fundamental values of this country, this civilization, this culture, and putting us into a dangerous situation. This has to be broadly talked about. Once it is broadly talked about, then only our political leaders will step up. Our political leaders don't lead, they follow. That's
I'll tell you what.
In democratic society, political leaders follow the public opinion. They don't create and lead the public opinion.
Well, what we'll do is we'll have that conversation. We won't have it down the road. In fact, we're going to have it just in a few minutes. Good morning. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Salim Mansur. He's a professor of political science at Western University and the author of A Delectable Lie, A Liberal Repudiation of Multiculturalism. If you have any questions for him, give us a call, 514-790-0991 Star Talk or 1-800-491-CJAD. Tell me, Mr. Mansour, what was the moment in time for you where you said, you know what, this is not working? Was there a particular event, a particular incident, or was it just a culmination of a lot of things going wrong?
Well, a lot of things are going around. I mean, one was aware of the situation. I'm talking personally through the 1990s, you know, as things evolved in this direction. But if there was one moment, and then one looks behind and after. It is 9/11. And all that has happened after 9/11. I mean, we are in a very difficult situation. We are faced with an Islamist onslaught right across the Western world, and we have no clue, no idea of how to contend with this. That is the Western government. There's a great disconnect between the public in Western societies and the government, the political leaders and the media elite and the intellectual leaders. The public understands exactly what is happening at the ground level, whether you are in Norway, whether you are in Netherlands, or whether you are in Montreal or in Toronto. What is happening, if you ever heard the story in Toronto, the public school system, the musketeria, the prayers, which is undermining our secular liberal values during the school hours, so on and so forth. We can see that, but because of multiculturalism, which, as I say, is a delectable lie, and a lie has to be promoted by some argument, and that argument is political correctness.
Let me,
we have disarmed ourselves.
Is it just my imagination, though, or do most of these examples, and I'm not trying to lead you any place, but is it just my imagination, or do most of the examples you're citing in Canada take place in the Greater Toronto area?
Well, Montreal is unaffected by it. I mean, I'm not in Montreal and I'm not in Quebec, but I have a sense, and I read people from there. I have this website in front of me, pointdebasculecanada.ca. These are good Montrealers and good French Canadians who are writing about the situation in Quebec, about the concerns they are having. And, of course, the political leadership is not paying attention. And, of course, the media is not paying attention. The mainstream media is not paying attention. And we cannot have an open discussion about this. By the way, if I might take 10 seconds of your time,
sure.
I will be in Montreal on Monday at McGill University, invited by McGill students, at 7:30, and Act for Canada, the International Free Press Society. So if your audience want to join in the conversation, I would love to meet with them.
Absolutely.
That's 7:30 at McGill at McConnell Engineering Building.
Okay.
Room 204.
Room 204, McConnell Engineering, Monday, 7:30. You'll be speaking at McGill University. Let's do some speaking now. Let's take some calls. Let's hear from Don. Welcome to CJAD.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to say I agree with Mr. Mansur's comments that multiculturalism has failed. It's not only the 9/11. For instance, you remember a few years back that the Native peoples seized the bridge in Montreal. And, there was actually a confrontation with the army, and there were fears that it could turn into a bloodbath. I mean, Native peoples, maybe they're different, but, a lot of people are saying, the Canadian taxpayer pays probably with all the benefits. One estimate was up to $100,000 per head.
Yeah. Actually, Don, I think there's a lot of Native people who would say, you know what, if we were smart, we would have absorbed you into our culture. We wouldn't be having these problems. 514-790-0991. Good morning. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Salim Mansur. He's the author of A Delectable Lie, a liberal repudiation of multiculturalism. And if you're, as the title suggests, we have not been giving or getting great reviews of Canada's policy of multiculturalism. But Mr. Mansur, let me ask you: should we? And we mentioned this at the start of this segment. Should we adopt the American approach? Should we have a melting pot policy in this country? And what exactly would the melting pot consist of?
Listen, your question itself begs the question: why do we have to adopt any other people's sense of history and politics? We ourselves, Canada itself, has its own history and politics. We are a different country from the United States in terms of our political system, our constitution. We are a parliamentary democracy. We are a constitutional monarchy. We have an entirely different history. But what we share commonly with the United States, with Great Britain, with France, with the liberal democracies in the West, with Australia and New Zealand, is the fact that we are a liberal country. This is a country and a culture that has evolved, as I said, over several centuries. And this is a culture that has come to the conclusion that the highest value is the individual. That is what makes liberalism a universal value. It is based upon freedom and individual rights and respect for law. So your question itself is paradoxically an undermining of the very things that we all cherish. But we cherish it in a different way, in particular different circumstances. We are a country that was built by the coming together of two cultures, English and French. Look, I came to Canada from India, not to a multicultural country. I came to a Canada that was a liberal democracy. I wanted to be a Canadian, and I am a Canadian. I don't go around talking about myself as a hyphenated Canadian. I am a Muslim. I value individual freedom. I value critical thought. I value free speech, which is the mother of all freedom. And we, by adopting multiculturalism, we are abandoning those values which made us a great country.
All right, Mr. Mansur, we have time for one more call. Let's hear from Rocco. Welcome to CJAD.
Good morning. I agree with the professor 150%. I'm an immigrant. I came here. I didn't expect anything, okay? If I wanted to practice my religion, that's my business in private. If I want to put up a feast or something, that's my business. I don't want the government to give any money for anything. You want to preserve your customs, fine. Don't ask the taxpayers to give you anything about that. You want to practice that, you want to pray, whatever, 5 times. I don't give a damn. That's your private affairs, not at school or anywhere else.
Okay, let's hear what Tom has to say. Welcome to CJAD. Tom? I guess Tom's left. So remind me, Mr. Mansur, you're speaking at McGill this Monday at 7:30 at the McConnell Engineering Building, room 204.
I hope to see you there, sir.
And the topic will be the topic we've been discussing, the topic of your book?
I hope, yeah, and an open discussion on this issue of multiculturalism.
And just one last question for you, because
yes,
we have just enough time. What do you think of? And a lot of in the last federal election, a lot of people said that the Conservative Party pretty well won a majority because they figured out how to beat the Liberals at their own game, which was basically go after the so-called ethnic vote. Do you think, Ed, are you as disturbed by the perception of an ethnic vote in this country as you are of multiculturalism?
Well, ethnic vote taken on by selling an idea, pandering to the ethnic values that goes against the liberal values that I'm talking about, which build this country. Yes, I am very concerned about it, and I think the conservative will have to face up to the same criticism if they keep going on that route. I don't think the majority of Canadians want to see